I think we'll reach a point within the next 5 to 10 years where a majority of the hotels will be maybe 90% automated. So especially on the select service side, they just won't have staff around.
Why did you get into hospitality in the first place?
My first hotel job was at a Ritz-Carlton. And the reason I got into it was because I was going to college at that time, and there was a Ritz-Carlton nearby, and a lot of people there worked at the Ritz-Carlton. And, as students, we really liked, we needed to make money, and people said, my friends and that worked there, they would say, oh, you make great tips at the Ritz-Carlton, and they were right. So I made a lot of money in tips. So that was it was fun and enjoyable, but that really drew me in. I saw really how fun hospitality can be.
And you worked as a night auditor, right?
Well, so primarily when I started with the Hyatt brands, I worked at the front desk. Now, when you do the front desk at a hotel, especially a select service hotel, you end up doing a lot of things. And even though I was never officially a night auditor, I definitely worked enough night audits to throughout my time in hotels to really understand the night audit process. So yeah, I guess I consider myself an unofficial night auditor.
In all your years in hospitality, what do you now find the most difficult thing and the most rewarding thing about this job?
The fact that it's a 24/7, 365 business, the lights are always on. So it's really hard to, for example, think about internally with your colleagues. You like to have that communication, but you have to understand that there's the AM shift, PM shift, and night shift. And so that's a lot of communication that happens, and you have to be very, you have to recognize that other people's schedules, and at the same time, you're obviously dealing with the guests. So that's always a challenge, communication. But I think, I'm a lot on the technology side, and technology, there's a lot of good, but it's also a challenge because it's hard to really implement a technology and get adoption when you have so many different people working at different times. So it's a challenge.
In what way have technology changed the industry since you've been here?
No. And, obviously, so some people have been, in hospitality for 40 years. They've really seen a lot of changes. But, I've definitely seen a lot of changes myself. And I'll give you a very simple example. So back in 2012, I've worked as a valet at a Ritz-Carlton. I was making tips, and then my other jobs, I would make tips. And people still at that time, they would still have cash on hand. But now nobody carries cash. So for example, when talking about technology and how it's changing, employees or people that are looking for work and hospitality, when all of a sudden they're not getting tipped because nobody carries cash, that's a loss for them. That doesn't really motivate them. So there's a lot of these technologies out there that are providing that provide a way for guests to tip hotel workers directly, and I think that's great because it goes into employee retention. Employees are happier. The ease of guest interaction is a lot easier. So that's just an example of, I think, how technology is really changing hospitality. First of all, I love the tipping culture. I think it's great. But yes, it has gotten out of hand, and a lot of times I write about that because it's just, getting really ridiculous. You go to maybe like a quick service restaurant where you just order at the counter and they're asking you already for a tip, so based on what?
Yeah.
So I think, I do want to put some of that responsibility on these platforms that help with the, digital tipping, because they of course they want to sell their product as, hey, your employees can make more tips, and you can do this and that, and this hopefully will generate more tips. And I'm sure all that works. But if these digital tipping companies, so it's a little bit of their responsibility to say, hey, this is how you probably want to use it. This is how you don't want to use it. Now, they can only provide best practices, right? It's up to the operators to how they use it. But I think, kind of that education piece, best practices, it lies on them. And again, also the operators themselves, they don't want to be seen as, all of their operators, they're really pushing the tips because they're not paying their employees enough, something like that. And that's just kind of what I see happen and read. So, it's a balancing act, but I like tips. As opposed to other markets, abroad that they don't do many tips. I don't like that. I really think it provides better service and more motivation. So let's not lose it. So let's not push it.
What advice would you give to someone just entering the industry?
The advice would be, that show them what a career in hospitality looks like. Because it's, and I think a lot of industry, veterans or experts, kind of agree that we don't do a good enough job of telling new entrants what a career might look like. People just see it as a job I'm working at the hotel restaurant, I'm working at the front desk, but I'm just using that until I find a real job, quote unquote. So that there is a huge, so I would never have thought that I would be where I am right now. I'm not working directly inside hotels, but I am in a position where I'm supporting hotels and vendors. So it's kind of, have an open mind, go to a lot of networking events. I'm starting to see more of these as hotel companies want to develop their internal employees. They're, more proactive about, training their employees, telling them about different ways that they can navigate their careers, and networking goes a long way. So a lot of these, for example, here in Georgia, in Atlanta, there's the Atlanta Hospitality Alliance. They host networking events, every quarter. So going to those, anybody can go. Of course, there's a cost to it, but just being out there, being a leader, getting outside your comfort zone.
A lot of discussions were for some time around like Airbnb crashing all the industry or something, but we didn't see that actually happen. What do you think is the future for the industry?
As far as Airbnb, it's always a battle between them, like hotels, but I think it's good competition at the end. But the industry, and I hate to say it, but because I'm sure everyone's talking about it, but it's AI, more technology. And I think, so I have a really, what I think is a unique, but very kind of maybe far out there idea of what the future looks like. And it's that because we're getting so much AI and automation, I think we'll reach a point within the next 5 to 10 years where a majority of the hotels, especially on the branded side, will be maybe 90% automated. So especially on the select service side, they just won't have staff around. So luxury will be considered any hotel that has actual staff. So we talk a lot about the human touch, and hospitality will always need the human touch. But in reality, I think that economy segments and select service, they're going to be 80% automated in every which way. And again, it will be sort of like a luxury. The hotels will be able to charge a premium because they have staff. And I think people will get used to it. People get used to driverless Waymos or Ubers or whatever. So we already see those, and people are okay with no driver. So I think the hotel is going to be the same eventually. Again, to some extent.
But do you think it's actually like a consumer-driven trend or just technology-driven?
It's hard to say. I think a little bit of both. Here's the thing. Obviously, this is like I told you at the beginning of this question. This is my gut feeling. There's a lot of data out there that I'm probably not seeing. But if you look at the younger generations, and I'm still, I'm a millennial, but even younger generations, everything's on their phone, touchless. it's just very different. So part of it, I think, is consumer driven, and part of it is technology. We keep, as an industry, kind of, I don't want to say complaining, but facing the challenge of increased costs and all that. And automation is the way to reduce costs. So sure, we want, that human touch. And I think some hospitality will still have that human touch. But if you present to a business, at the end of the day, it's a business. So if you present to a business owner a way to run a hotel with extremely reduced costs, but you're automating it, and then you can maybe even pass along some of those savings to the customer. I don't know if that's a possibility, but customers will say, yeah, I'll stay at this hotel that's 80%, 90% automated, maybe no much staff, but hey, I'm paying a lot less. Just an example. But I think that there's a little bit about consumer driven is some of it, and then tech is just, we just kind of push tech on every aspect of society, and I think people just kind of get used to the idea of automation to a point where they're not going to push back. I mean, as long as it's working, though, that's the thing. It's in hospitality, it's a challenge to adopt because of what I told you. We're 24/7, 365. So it's a challenge to adopt. So I think it could be 5-10 years, but it could be more. But if it's 80% automated and the technology itself is not working, then people will not respond to it. So,
how is inflation hitting hospitality? We know that restaurants are suffering a lot, but what about hotels?
Hotels are definitely feeling it. They had been feeling it for a couple of years now, and it seems to be going down, but we're not quite there yet. But I recently just read an article, and a lot of the industry, some industry executives are on that article, talking about the current environment, which with so much uncertainty and the possibility of a resurgence of inflation to a point where it's maybe 4, 5, 6, 7%, whatever that is. So it's definitely a concern. I think I've seen there's a lot of projects in talking about hotel development where it seemed like the pipeline was really filling up with early stage planning and things and even construction. But I think that has kind of halted a little bit, and it's funny how it mirrors the residential real estate market. I see it in my own neighborhood where some projects stalled out just because inflation wasn't maybe coming down as fast, or the interest rates weren't coming down as much as some might have thought. So it's definitely affecting hospitality, but there's another part of hospitality we're still going strong, hiring and development, and the luxury segment seems to be plugging along very well. So yeah, I just kind of have to make adjustments, but it definitely affects it.
With technology and not opening new hotels, it seems like where would they be, these new jobs,
Well, no, the good news is that hospitality, ever since I've joined, we've always been short-staffed. and we, even with technology, we are still, the industry is still short-staffed. So there are jobs out there. I know wages have gone up. Just obviously the pandemic had a lot to do with it. So I think it's always a good time to go in, but it's another one of those balancing things, inflation is putting maybe somewhat of a stop to it, but hotels are still hiring, and like I said, wages have gone up. Sometimes it's a challenge because hospitality kind of wants to keep up. But I wouldn't say there's no jobs in hospitality because of inflation and everything. There's still very much a lot of jobs.
Does hospitality struggle with employee retention? Restaurant industry does a lot. So I was wondering about hospitality.
I know, and I worked restaurant industry as well, and it's tough. It's tough. So in the hotel. They do suffer with employee retention. I was actually kind of burnt out several years ago in one hotel. Kind of drew me to actually to the vendor side. But the good thing is that so COVID, obviously, it was a lot of bad things that happened during COVID, but it brought a lot of good things to the forefront, and some of that is employee retention. I see a lot of companies doing a lot of innovative things that that especially frontline employees appreciate, which is like daily pay, even no, not even weekly, but daily pay. So after their work is done, they get paid for the day. Going back to the digital tipping as well, they get it instantly into their bank account. So benefits, actually, and that falls under the benefits. Usually when we think of benefits, we think of salary and health insurance, which honestly has never been the best in our industry, I think. So hotel companies are getting very creative in other aspects of benefits. Part of that being, how they get paid. Also, the work schedule. So we've been very like 3 shifts, 2 days off. So they're getting technology is helping create those schedules where people can be more flexible and give them a little bit more work-life balance. And I think also with just understanding that we got very burnt out during the pandemic, and hotel leaders understand that, hey, this is very important. So let's make sure that our associates are taking the time off that they need. Let's making sure that we're supporting them with the right tools. So I think employee retention is improving. It's still a challenge, though.
Is it getting better? Or are people yelling at each other?
Yeah.
Or
I mean,
how does this work now?
Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, if it's getting better or not. I think it's no one person can make it better. It really takes the industry and the leaders, to set the tone, and that tone being, more welcoming, more providing that work-life balance. Like, for example, for me, I remember, working in the hotel, I would work double shifts, and I would stay over, and things like that. But it was also important for me to not just go home and then do it again, but it was important for me to maybe, sit down the next day or the next week with my manager and tell them, hey, XYZ happened, therefore I had to do ABC, and this caused all these problems. Because the thing is, a lot of times, I'll put myself in that bucket. I worked, I worked a lot, and I was very determined, but it did take a toll on me. But if we allowed that to happen unnoticed, then usually hotel leaders or GMs or whatever, they're just going to say, oh, that person, they work really well and don't complain. But it's not about complaining. It's just about, making sure that those hotel GMs and those leaders understand that you're putting all this work and what's happening behind the scenes. Because a lot of times they just don't see what's going on behind the scenes. They just see, I hate to say it, but sometimes they just see numbers, and occupancy levels and all that, RevPAR, whatever. So it's important, I think, also for frontline leaders to make time, even if their managers don't reach out to them, you reach out to your managers and say, hey, this is what's going on, what went on yesterday, and really feel like they have a voice. Because a lot of times, I think that's what also happens. I mean, hotel employees, they get frustrated. They just want to go home. They feel like they don't have a voice. But, share that with your leaders. And I think that's, at least in my experience, it really worked. I mean, I think, and that's how I got, how I was able to, really move my career.
If you could change one thing about the industry, like just like that, what would you choose?
I would like us to move away from all these, legacy, outdated technology, but it doesn't happen with a snap of a finger,
Like what?
For example, the PMSs, there's a lot of PMSs that are very old. There's some of the brands that are using old PMSs, and you have new people coming into the industry and they're working with outdated technology. Now, there's a reason why you can't just, switch them, with a snap of a finger. But if I could just switch them from one day to the next, new technology across the board, but more than PMS, you're talking about your reservation systems, a lot of back office technologies, payroll, procurement, it's just outdated technology.
How do you see your career developing further? So you have like a big journey. Where do you think it's going next?
I recently started working at Hotel Interactive, which puts on the industry by tech events, which a lot of people are familiar with. This is a great step in my career because I'm now talking to hotel partner vendors and hoteliers about coming together to really, build the relationships, just build relationships and learn about what could help the industry. So my entire hospitality career, I've always been focused on learning more than what I'm just doing at the moment. So when I was at hotels, in operations, I wanted to learn about sales. I wanted to learn about reservations. I wanted to learn about food and beverage. When I was on the partner side, I wanted not just to learn about my technology, but I wanted to learn about other technologies and how they integrate. So always asking questions and always be learning. That's why I'm very active on LinkedIn. So where do I see my career going is just learning more, expanding my network of hoteliers and vendor partners. That way, whether it's 5 or 10 years from now, I'm much better. I'm much more knowledgeable than most people in the industry. So if I go back to the hotel side, I have a huge network of hoteliers, mentors that can help me. And also I know a lot about different technology. So I really like where I am because I learn a lot from vendors and hoteliers, and there's a lot of industry veterans that I learn from. So where will I be? I don't know, but definitely wherever I do go, I'll be much better prepared because of what I'm doing now.